Good morning. I'm Jamie Sheridan. I'm from Line, and we've got projects called the Aging Curve and Life Liberated, running through the Stoke renewal through the Digital Innovation and Education Hub. Life Liberated is a concept we're developing, proactive healthcare to prolong working life, enable healthy activity. We've got clinical, academic and industry partners. We launched the first phase in January 2022. Partly it's private retail, so the big concept is a healthy aging superstore, which is aimed at 45 to 70 plus, and that's a Life Liberated, so product, technology and services. And then this side of the business, the Aging Care, is community-based social impact, which is looking at the aging curve for functional society. Lots of exciting components, new ideas involved in the concept. The segmentation into healthy aging longevity is very current with government health and social care agendas. And it's not, we're not just doing just because I'm 51, but that's sort of part of the. And this is the delivery team. Gareth, who's the handsome chap in the middle top there, is Podiatrist. Lynn Coulsing is on the right is an occupational therapist, does a lot with ways to wellbeing. We have webinars which we can share with her as well. Tracy Calder on the bottom is a psychotherapist and works with a lot with horses. She's actually based in Leek, so she does mental health and wellbeing. Owen Fraser Williams in the middle is a sort of fitness coach. He talks a lot of physical health and well-being and practical fitness nutrition. And Rod in the corner there is our marketing specialist. And we're coming together to try and bring together a concept that we can share, which is what we've been doing for Stoke CRF. Digital Innovation Education Hub is a consortium project out of the Community Renewal Fund with Stoke-on-Trent Council, funded by UK government, and it's run by a company called Wavemaker, who you might well know, and their CIC in Stoke, and then with the Staff's Uni, My Health Kit, who I mentioned before, and then Framescape and Straightline, which is my company. This is the overview of what we're doing, and this was the original startup. It gives you an idea of some of the nature of what we've been doing. And this talk is on Diabetic Foot webinar, and without any further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Gareth.
Okay, right. If you can allow me to share, then that would be great.
So I don't understand sharing. Sorry about this. We've done this enough times. We shouldn't be doing it.
So each system is slightly different. I think you just make me an administrator or something or other.
Can you see now?
No, nothing yet.
Can you share now? You should be able to share now, Gareth.
It says host has disabled attendee screen sharing.
I've made you host, okay?
Good job. I should do this. And hopefully any second, wonders. You should all have a slide in front of you now, which just says care of the foot in diabetes.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's okay. Great. So what I'll do is there's an awful lot to discuss about diabetes. I spend a lot of time discussing diabetes, both with GPs, carers, ward nurses, and anybody else who's prepared to listen. It's nice to be able to address patients. We did a session on diabetic foot care aimed solely at patients. And that was done on Friday in Mere Health Centre, I think it was as well. So it was nice to get back out in front of people. Essentially, these are feet. The standard issue is one left, one right, 5 toes on each. They're available in various sizes and colours, but is the whole aim is to come in with those and to go out again with those.
Sorry. So it's Gareth, it's not moving on, so you might need to sort of actually share the slide, start the slideshow.
Oh, okay, okay. Hang on a second. Can you see that?
I can, yeah. It's still in the, it's still on the main one. It's not on the full slideshow.
All right, okay. Let's try. Is that any good?
I can see it. I can see it, but it's not. It's
not moving forward now.
No.
Okay, no worries. Wait a minute. Let's try something else. Right. Sorry about this. So it's usually something that goes cock up at some point. All right. You might have the screen in front of you now, which is like the editing suite for the
that's it.
PowerPoint. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll move through the slides a bit like this. But this keeps it going, so hopefully you can see the slides that go along. So yeah, a lot of people don't think much about their feet until they cause problems. I think it was Leonardo da Vinci that said it's the human foot is a wonder of creation, but also a wonder of engineering. There's 26 bones in each of your foot. That's 52 in all, which is a quarter of the bones in the human body. So there's an awful lot going on down there. Diabetes is a major problem within the UK. It's costing us an awful lot of money. The estimates for this financial year will be around about £1.2 billion a year. That's just forget your insulins and various things like that. That's just looking after diabetic foot complications. In England alone, in 2019, we were hitting around about 185 major amputations a week. Major amputations means that we remove anything above the ankle, so a below knee amputation, above knee amputation. If some patients happen to lose one or two toes, that's classed as a minor amputation. So it's 185 major amputations a week. Since COVID, it's probably gone up to about 200. This is just England alone. Because people have waited a lot longer, they're reaching us in a worse state of repair, as it were. In terms of diabetes itself, when I started in practice 30 years ago, about 1.2% of the UK diabetes UK population had diabetes. Now we're up to about 6%, where there's a high rate of patients from Afro-Caribbean, Chinese, South Asian communities. Then it can go up as far as 10, even 12% of the population. So, for example, in there's an area in the middle of Bradford is famous for being quite Asian dominant. Their rate of diabetes is 10%, which is on a par with places like Malta or Portugal, who are among the worst in Europe. And what's forecasted to happen is by 2030, and certainly by 2035, this will double. At the moment, we've got about 4 million diabetes patients in the UK. That's diagnosed. We've got around about 1 million out there who are undiagnosed. They don't actually know they've got it yet. And that will probably double within the next 10 to 15 years. The whole idea at the moment is not only helping people who have diabetes to be aware of their feet, but also those people around them, so we can create more of a sort of a safety cushion, if you will. So once you are diagnosed with diabetes, you are at a higher risk of ulceration and amputation. But this isn't the end game. We can stop a lot of this. The International Diabetes Federation published a paper many years ago, and they looked at the worldwide amputation rate and worldwide ulceration rate as well. And with amputation, they reckon that around about 80% of them, that's 80%, are preventable. What we need to do is the healthcare professionals are doing the best they can, but we also need to relate good care back to the patients, so the patients can help themselves and their spouses, partners, aunties, uncles, anybody can help them out as well. The best thing we do is to promote good optimal control of diabetes. As you're probably aware, there's two major types of diabetes in the UK. It's called type 1 and type 2. Type 1, sweeping with a broad brush, is generally these are the patients who are dependent on insulin. Their pancreas inside their body, which produces insulin, has shut down entirely, so it doesn't work. And the way insulin works in the human body is when you have something to eat, if it contains a carbohydrate, then that will get broken down into sugars and glucose, basically. And as soon as glucose is found in the blood, insulin is then triggered to take it out of the blood and store it in the cells as energy, if you will. So if you haven't any insulin, what happens is you end up with a high level of glucose in the blood, or the posh word is hyperglycemia. And that gives you the problems if you have high blood sugars all the time, or if you're a bit rocky in control and you go up and down a lot with your levels of blood glucose, then that can cause problems. Type 2 used to be called non-insulin dependent diabetes because most patients, they find they've developed diabetes later in life. And they are producing insulin, but not enough. Or it could be that they're producing insulin for their body, but perhaps they've got a little bit too much body to cope with, as it were. So they just need diet control, but also they may be on what we call oral drugs, tablets that you take to try and help reduce the level of sugar in the blood. The trouble is, once you do develop hyperglycemia, you should address it straight away. So this is why we look at diabetes control. This is why the practice nurses, the diabetes specialist nurses, are all obsessed with what we eat and how quickly it's absorbed into the bloodstream, etc. So in terms of the diabetes in the UK, around about, if you take that 4 million figure I gave you earlier, that's the diagnosed diabetes patients in the UK, around about 8% of those will have type 1, and around about 90% will have type 2. If you're familiar with maths, you would realize that adds up to 98. Where's the other 2%? Well, that's made up of a variety of other much rarer types of diabetes. One is which is gestational diabetes, which develops obviously during pregnancy. But usually when baby's delivered, mum tends to recover from that, although she is at higher risk of developing type 2 later in life as well. So there's a lot of work being done around the gestational work at the moment. So in terms of control of diabetes, it's your intake, it's what you put into your body, it's what you demand of your body, for example, exercise. And also what should be happening is, obviously for reasons of which, thanks to COVID, not many patients have had an annual check on their feet for a couple of years, so there's a lot of catch-up going on. But what the idea of today is to just give patients a good idea of what they can do to help preserve their own feet and to look after them. And what we do in the podiatric and the medical world is we allot a risk of ulceration to each patient. So after you've been to see your practice nurse or your healthcare assistant, whoever's doing the animal foot check, he or she will then tell you that you're either at low risk of developing a foot ulcer, you're at moderate risk, sometimes we call this you're at risk, and then, or you can be at high risk of developing a foot ulcer. The vast majority of patients are in low risk group. About 80% of our diabetes patients within the UK are at low risk of developing an ulcer. To get into the moderate group, then you develop either blood supply problems, so we have trouble finding your pulses. This is because there's a buildup of atherosclerotic plaques inside the arteries, which means that not enough blood gets through to the foot. And the best analogy we've come up with for that is your bathroom sink. And if you happen to live with somebody who has long hair, sometimes the hairs get stuck in the sink. So the water does drain away in the sink, but it takes a little while to do so. And that's the similar thing that happens with the blood supply in the foot. If you have the buildup of plaque inside the arteries, it basically it's blocking it. Not completely occludes, it doesn't block it off altogether, but it just means blood does get through, but not quite as much to make things work properly. So if you have a blood supply problem, and in some patients, they have a nerve supply problem as well. This is, the posh word is called neuropathy. Basically, this is caused by the blood vessels that supply the nerves in the foot, and the nerves begin to send either incorrect impulses, or in some cases, they just don't send impulses at all. So in the very worst cases, for example, we had a patient come into our clinic a while back, a few years ago now, and his presenting complaint was, my ankle clicks, but only in the kitchen. So we took the socks and shoes off, and he had a drawing pin stuck in his heel. His entire house is carpeted. He liked to walk around barefoot, but his wife had decided she wanted laminate flooring in the kitchen. So the only time he became aware of that drawing pin in his foot was when it was hitting the laminate floor and it was going tick, tick, tick along the floor. But he didn't present with, I've stepped on a drawing pin. Now that's quite profound neuropathy. That's at the sort of far end of the scale. But usually what patients will complain of is sort of pins and needles, if you will, in the toes. and that's something that they get asked at these annual foot checks. So if that happens, if you develop some level of nerve damage, or if you have blood supply, if you have a major deformity like a massive bunion, etc., then that is a risk factor. That means you would move from low risk into moderate risk. The high risk, these are much more likely to ulcerate. They've got about a 1 in 2 chance of ulcerating, so they will be under the care of the diabetic foot team. In most cases, in most areas throughout the UK, the low-risk patients are now being discharged from care within the podiatry department in the NHS. They'll be just monitored once a year by a GP. The patients who are deemed to be at moderate risk, they'll be kept an eye on, so they may go back and see the podiatrist perhaps every 4, 5, 6 months or so. But the ones who are high risk will be, they're almost like a revolving door into the clinic. They'll be on first name terms with the diabetes podiatrist, and that podiatrist, she'll know where the patient went on holiday, what the grandkids' names are, etc. Okay, so that's what should happen when you come out of a foot screening, is you as a patient should be told if you're at low risk, you're at moderate risk, or high risk of developing a wound. Okay, but we can stop an awful lot of this with basic foot care. We've got 5 toes in each foot, so there's 5 steps, basically. The important thing is daily hygiene. So we ask patients to bathe and dry their feet every day, and this gives you a chance to, and I do appreciate as we all get older, the feet do get a little bit further away from the rest of us. It can be difficult to get down there. This is when you find out if you've chosen the right partner or neighbour, because they can look after your feet for you as well. We have had married couples in the past, and the husband has refused point blank to do anything with his wife's feet. He loves her from the ankles up, sort of thing, but you do need to find out somebody that can help you with daily washing. And it's a hygiene issue, but also it's an inspection issue. So we need patients to get familiar with their feet and what they look like. Everybody's feet are different, thank goodness. We need to be looking in between the toes, make sure nothing nasty is going on there. We need to dry carefully between the toes, and you need to pat your feet dry, completely dry. Once they're dry, then that's the best time to moisturize your feet. I'll talk about that a little bit in a few more minutes of time, but moisturizing the feet, I'm afraid as we all get a little bit older, the skin does tend to become drier. It's just one of those things that happen to us. Skin and nail care, a lot of patients will complain that as they get older, they feel that their nails are getting harder, etc. So what we preach is that once you've bathed your feet and dried them off, moisturize them, and then just file your nails down. And if you've got a little bit of hard skin around the back of the heel or something, file that down as well. And a bit of daily filing means you don't have to cut as often. Simple as that. Socks, we ask people to change socks daily. I'll go into socks in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. And shoes, 69% of the adults in the UK are wearing the wrong size shoes. Most of us seem to assume that if you're a size 8 when you're 25, you'll still be a size 8 when you're 65. This isn't true. As we all get older, things tend to relax a little bit. The elasticity within our tissues decreases. So the best example I can give you, if you get hold of, perhaps you've got somebody in the family who's sort of 10, 12, 15 years of age, and you pinch the skin in the back of the hand, that skin will return to sort of flat, normal, if you like, very, very quickly. Whereas if you've got, say, an 85 or 95-year-old, if you pinch them on the back of the hand, you'll see the skin takes a little while to go down, and that's a loss of elasticity within the connective tissue. So what happens in the foot, that loss of elasticity and connective tissue suppleness, if you will, that manifests itself as your feet will actually grow a little bit flatter and a little bit longer. The Americans call it foot elongation. So in vast majority of cases, we will be at least half a size bigger in shoes as we get a little bit older. And it's also noted that a lot of patients haven't paid much attention to the width of their feet as well. You need to make sure there's a good width around it. But I'll cover shoes in a few moments in a little bit more detail for you. Oops. So this is the foot file that was put into the health kit boxes. They're available through most pharmacies, etc. Stainless steel ones we like because they tend to be a little bit tougher. They don't bend as much and they allow you to exert the right pressure on it. Incidentally, if you are using these, they need to clean them after each one. Just a little scrubbing brush under running water will help. And what we'd advise is 1 file each for people, so you don't share them, just in case you pick up any little bugs. Mainly fungal nail infection, to be honest. That's highly contagious. So If there's a family of 4, we ask you have 4 files, simple as that. The stainless steel files are suitable for nails and for skin. When you're filing your nails, use a downward strokes only. If you put the file against your nail and then pull upwards, that's extremely uncomfortable. It's not very pleasant. So just file it downwards, and you'll be looking to file straight across the nail as well. And dry skin on the back of the heel. Once you've washed your feet and you've dried them, that's the best time to scrub the skin on the back of the heel if you want to, and then you put the moisturising product on afterwards. When it comes to moisturising, there's basically 2 types of moisturiser. There's one called occlusive. These are things like Vaseline, where they basically put a layer of product on top of the skin, so it occludes the skin, it blocks it in, so you don't get any moisture escaping from the skin. And the other type is called a humectant, and this means you add an active ingredient to the skin. And what in podiatry we like to do is we like to add what we call a natural moisturising factor. Natural moisturising factors, or NMFs, these exist in the skin, and one of them is called urea. This is not urine. Urine is a waste product, that's your wee. Urea is a compound that exists in the skin, and what it does is it attracts water. So it improves skin hydration, or the amount of water in your cells. What we want is optimal hydration. So if I can use an analogy again, if you think of a row of half a dozen blown up balloons, the ones you get party balloons, and you push them gently together, that's the sort of barrier you get in healthy hydrated skin. If the skin is dehydrated, there's not enough moisture, it's a bit like pushing half blown up balloons together. You don't get as good a contact, and you don't form as good a skin barrier. So if patients do develop dry skin, it's not just a bit of dryness on the foot. If the foot is very dry, then it means you can get little cracks and little fissures, particularly in the heels, because the skin isn't supple and hydrated enough to move with the stresses of walking or running, etc. So a lot of patients with very dry skin will end up with cracks. And obviously, if there's a break in the skin, that's a portal of entry for any bugs or bacteria around. So we need to avoid that in everybody, not only just the diabetes patients. But with the urea compounds, these are freely available in, well, not freely, you have to pay for them, but they're available in Boots, Superdrug, that sort of thing. And to get urea into the skin, we've got a range of percentages. So if you have 5, 10, 15%, that will really boost your hydration levels, the amount of water you have in your skin. If you get up to 25%, as featured with this particular product, that actually gets rid of a lot of the dry skin as well. It's the posh word is keratolytic. It actually breaks down your dry skin, so you end up getting an awful lot better. I'll show you before and after in a few minutes. But this particular product we like because it's once a day. A lot of moisturisers will say apply as often as you need, or once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times a day. That's not going to work in most cases. People are too busy these days. So what we ask the patients to do is, with this particular product, we're asking you to bathe your feet, dry your feet, do a little bit of filing, and then slap on the moisturiser. You can do this any time of day, morning, noon, or night. With some people, they like to bathe the feet last thing at night. If you put this particular product on, it's very quickly absorbed, so you're not going to end up with smears and streaks down your bed sheets, and it's quite a nice smell as well. I mean, your feet are as far away from your nose as you can get, but it's still quite nice to have nice smelling stuff on your feet. So just to give you an example, this is the difference this particular product made. This is part of a study made up in NHS Highlands, and the difference between the patient heel on the left and the right is 4 minutes. When she'd applied it once a day for 5 days, she'd actually got rid of all of that dryness and that little crack halfway down the back of the heel there. That disappeared in about 3 or 4 days. So that's how quick this can work. And because it works quickly, the patients like it. It gets their own sort of approval. So it means they're far more compliant, and they carry on using the product. And if they carry on using the product, it means the skin is better hydrated, and that is your best defense to the outside world. I said I'd mention a little bit about socks. We like seamless socks, and we like the ones that don't cause what we call trenching around the legs. You get some guys who, at the end of the day, everybody's feet swell towards the end of the day. So quick hint, if you are going shoe shopping, for example, don't go in the morning. I know it's easy to find car parking spaces in the morning perhaps, but if you go in the morning, your feet are actually slightly smaller than they are in the afternoon. So if you're going for a new pair of shoes, go after lunch. Okay, but then go back to socks. Yeah, if the elastic is too tight, it digs into the ankle or mid calf, etc. So what we like we like these new designer socks without that tight elastic, and the best ones are bamboo socks. Bamboo is a highly sustainable product. We did have a question from somebody once saying, well, if we use the bamboo, what happens to the pandas? Don't worry about the pandas. Bamboo is an extremely fast growing product. It's claimed in some parts, you can actually hear it growing at night. So there's a lot of bamboo around. We're not starving pandas. Don't worry about that. The newest fabric out is a mixture of bamboo and, believe it or not, seaweed. If any of you spend any time on the beach, then you see there's always seaweed there. So it's actually a product called alginate. It doesn't mean your socks smell of the sea or anything daft like that, but a mix of bamboo and seaweed is a natural product. They're washable, tumble dryable, they're very soft to wear, very comfortable, and they're now being made without seams. So it's like a little tube, so there's no little bits of fluff or anything that get caught up at the end of the toes. So bamboo socks, I think in terms of cost, they're a little bit more expensive than your standard socks, but they do tend to last longer. They're more sustainable, etc. as well. So it makes you feel good about the environment. An average pair of socks out of bamboo will be somewhere around about £8 to £12. The ones featured in the pictures are pretty boring black, but you can get them with sparkly teddy bears and stars and goodness knows whatever. So if you have patients in your family who suffer with diabetes, then why not get them a pair of bamboo socks for Christmas? It's something a little bit different. The other thing we need to do as well is exercise. Now, this isn't just walking up and down, but we like to try and exercise the foot. We need to improve the strength in the foot muscles, and this helps you create a more efficient gait, the way you walk forward. In the kits that we provided with some patients, we gave them a little squidgy ball like this. Equally, you can use a tennis ball. That's okay. The squidgy ball is a little bit better because it's squidgy, so it's easier to pick up with your foot. But you can do these little exercises as often as you like. And this is the exercise you do with the ball. You're sitting down. Okay, so you're sitting down so that your knee is directly above your heel, so your foot is pointing straight down. And you put your foot under so you put the ball under the toes as indicated on picture 1, and then you roll your foot over the top of the ball and try and pick it up. Okay, and what this will do is it'll improve little muscles in your foot called flexors. They're the ones that bend your toes. Okay, and the more we bend the toes, the stronger those toes will become, and the stronger those toes become, the more efficient you will be when you're walking. So the last thing that happens just before you pick your foot up off the ground, your toes will help push you forward. So the stronger they are, the more efficient you will be at walking. There are plenty of other exercises you can do, and most patients are delighted that they can do these sitting down as well. There's one called display, where you put your feet flat on the ground. You can do this now whilst you're listening to me, and you splay your toes as if you're trying to reach the ceiling as much as you can, and hold that position for about 5 seconds, and then relax. And you can do that as often as you like. You just splay your toes up as much as you can and do a slow count of 5 seconds and then relax. The other little exercise, and you can do these in your shoes and footwear as well. The other little exercise is called the claw, and basically you scrunch your toes underneath your feet so that the ball of your foot comes off the ground. Okay, and you hold that for another 5 seconds and then relax, and do it again. You just scrunch your toes under the ball of your foot until the ball of your foot is off the ground. Hold it for 5 seconds, then relax. And those two little exercises, the splay and the claw, along with this little exercise, will make those toes a lot stronger and make you a lot more efficient at what we call toe off, when you're pushing the ground away from your feet when you're walking forward. And it just helps maintain feet. There's quite a lot of evidence now that this will help reduce fall rates amongst the elderly and frail. They've got stronger feet, they're in better and more efficient contact with the ground. Okay, so there's even if you're not a diabetes sufferer, this sort of exercise will help as you grow a little bit older anyway. Shoes, we have a major issue with shoes in podiatry. Generally speaking, patients are wearing the wrong footwear. What we're after is a good fit. So there's enough length there, so you've got a little bit of space at the end of your big toe between your big toe and the inside of the shoe, so it allows a little bit of movement. We want good fastening, so we like laces, we like Velcro. We don't like elastic and slip-ons. Although I was shouting at the TV the other night when England were beating Sweden 4-0, I was a little bit disappointed to see how many of the ladies were wearing elasticated footwear. It's not as good, and it allows too much movement sideways for the foot. So we need laces or Velcro to hold the foot in place. And the other thing we're after as well is right at the back. It's called the heel counter, where your heel rests in the shoe. The heel counter should be quite stiff, so it supports the heel as well. Okay. This is where I generally have a little pop at the ladies because they tend to wear pointed shoes. Not all the time. This is a general, a broad brush. But if you look at the shape of the foot, generally speaking, your big toe is in one side of your foot. It's not in the middle. So what we're after is a better shape to the end of the toe. If ladies in the audience, if you're going out for an evening and you want to wear a high heel with a pointy toe, that's up to you. That's fine. I don't mind an evening. But what we don't want is people wearing day in, day out. We did have a young lady coming through to one of the clinics we used to run, and we couldn't get the insoles into her office shoes. So we said, well, can you wear trainers? And her manager said, no, the office uniform dictates that you wear high heels. But the office manager was actually a man, and he wasn't wearing high heels. So I put it to the lady in question that if it was a uniform, why wasn't he in high heels? And therefore, after that, she was able to wear her trainers. We put the insoles into the trainers, and her knee pain got better. So it does make a difference. If you want to spend a night out, feeling a bit taller, etc., that's fine. But day in, day out, we should have low heel footwear. Ideally, the heel should be slightly high. We don't mind. We don't particularly like flatties. We like a little bit of a heel. So what you're doing is you're creating a slight downhill from your heel to your toe. And in shoes, that's called pitch, P-I-T-C-H. And that means that, it allows you to walk forward. It means you're a little bit more efficient when you move. So what we're after is good length, good width. We want to make sure those toes fit into the shoes. Like I said before, we prefer fastenings, good heel counter. And also just be aware of the pattern and the stitching. If they're stitching on the outside of the shoe, they'll be stitching on the inside of the shoe. And if the patient, particularly the one with diabetes, is suffering with some nerve damage, they may not be able to feel that stitching is rubbing on their shoe. So with all diabetes patients, as with all patients in fairness, when they're putting their shoes on, we ask them to just tap their shoes on the heel. So if there's anything falling into the shoe, any little bits of grit, or you'll be amazed what we can find in shoes. Any podiatrist that will do a presentation will have a picture at some point of what they've found in patient shoes. It'll be things like paper clips, one-piece Legos, tiddlywinks, all sorts of things. So we just ask patients to tap their shoes out, make sure nothing has fallen into the shoes that can do damage to their foot. With the diabetes patient, particularly the ones with nerve damage, they can't feel their feet as well. It can be that they've got that stone in the shoe and they can't feel it, so they don't move their foot out of the shoe. The stone stays in the shoe all day, and it does some damage to the skin. So what we're after is to stop that. So we get the patient to just check their shoes, make sure there's nothing falling in at night. So the top tips for feet, it goes back to the sort of 5 things really. It's hygiene with examination, moisturizing, changing the socks, and changing the shoes. And if you want to do a little bit of maintenance to the nails and the skin, then a metal file is what we're after. So just those 5 things will make a huge difference to everybody, regardless of whether or not the fact that they're diabetes patients. But what we're after is for those diabetes patients to become more familiar with their feet so they can spot anything out of the ordinary. We do have a number of patients now who actually take pictures of their feet. Their feet are a little bit further away from them than they want to, so they've actually invested in little selfie sticks, and they take pictures of the underneath of their feet. And if they don't see something, if they see something they don't like, they actually send a picture to their GP or their podiatrist, which is something that wouldn't have happened when I was in practice, to be honest. There's a few do nots there in red. Do not use corn plasters. In fairness to the corn plaster manufacturers, most of them will have a warning on the side of the packet saying not for use if you're a diabetes patient. And what inside the corn plaster is an acid. It's usually something called salicylic acid, and it'll be anything up to 20%, but it's an acid. It burns skin. So when you put a corn plaster on, you're applying an acid. It will make a hole in your skin. The trouble is, again, with diabetes patients, we don't want holes in their skin. But also, again, if they're suffering with neuropathy or nerve damage, they won't be aware that that is making a hole in their foot. And if the plaster moves, which is more than likely if it's applied to a toe, it could be burning through really good skin, and we don't want that to happen. So it's best, if the diabetes patient has corns or callus, then seek the help of a good podiatrist. Do not use corn plasters. Okay. Neither do we like patients, diabetes patients, using blades on their hard skin. I'll give you a quick example. We had a patient who was a home visit, and she was a Romani patient, quite a character, and she had a significant amount of hard skin on her feet. And her way of treating it was, she was quite keen on whiskey. So when she got the end of the whiskey bottle, if her hard skin was upsetting her, she'd sit in her caravan and I'd break the bottle, and when the glass smashed, she'd find a good sharp bit, and she'd use that sharp bit of glass to take off the hard skin on her foot. That hopefully will make everybody go, oh my goodness, what awful thing to do, but it'll remind you not to use blades on the hard skin you have. There are various products out there that have blades in them. We don't like those being used at all. If you want to file them down or use a pumice stone, that's fine. But if you have significant callus, then seek the help of a podiatrist and chiropodist. He or she will remove it, they'll pare it safely away, but also what they then will do is they'll address why you get the hard skin. So you'll be hopefully issued with some insoles or possibly a change of footwear advice, etc. In between toes is a very warm and damp, dark place at the best of times, so we don't like any creams or powders in between your toes. Moisturisers are great on the top of the foot and underneath the skin, underneath the foot, but we don't want anything in between the toes. There are times, occasionally, when we do put medicaments between the toes, for example, with fungal skin infections. But generally speaking, we don't want anything between the toes. The only thing between the toes is basically a towel to dry properly between them. That's it. Okay, so we don't want anything else between them. So in conclusion, yeah, I started at the top of the talk. We mentioned amputations and ulcers, etc. That there can be bad news, but the vast majority of patients are in the low risk group, and it's up to us as not just healthcare professionals, but also as auxiliary workers to the NHS and carers, etc., husbands, wives, family members, to promote good foot health and to look after them. And the best thing we can do is those five very simple things: wash and dry your feet every day, give them a good examination, making sure you dry carefully between the toes. That's what we do. Like moisturize your feet by all means. Use a good quality moisturizer, as we recommended earlier in the talk. We want different socks each day, and we want correct size shoes. And if we follow those things, in the vast majority of cases, you'll keep yourself in that low risk group. Remember, the low risk of developing a foot ulcer, that's around about 80% of our diabetes population. So the vast majority of people won't have any problems with their feet. But what these simple tips do is they will stop you from going into the at-risk group. Okay, I think that's about it. I can talk about diabetes all day. In fact, this afternoon I'm doing 3.5 hours talk to some nurses on diabetic foot care. But if you've got any questions or queries.
Gareth, thank you very much indeed. As ever, I always pick up new things when I'm listening to you. I'm going to switch off the recording, and then we can ask questions from the audience.